The February wind cut through Chicago's streets like broken glass. But inside the cramped studio apartment on North Halsted, the air hung thick and suffocating. Vanessa Rios pressed her back against the front door, her camera bag still clutched. In trembling hands, listening to the silence that followed Devon's departure. The lock clicked with finality, but somehow she knew it wouldn't be enough. It's over. Devon, she had said just minutes before, her voice steadier than her racing heart. We're done. I need you to leave and never come back. His response had been a smile not angry or hurt, but something far more unsettling. A knowing smile, as if he possessed some secret that made her words meaningless. You can't just turn off love, Vanessa, he had whispered, his fingers trailing along the wall as he moved toward the door. Real love finds a way. Now, in the aftermath of their final confrontation, Vanessa slumped against the door and tried to convince herself that the worst was behind her. 18 months of Devon's suffocating devotion, his constant texts, his unexpected appearances at her photography shoots, his way of making every conversation about them. About forever, it was finally over. Maya Singh emerged from the kitchen, her psychology textbook still spread across the small dining table where she'd been studying during the confrontation. Her dark eyes, usually warm with understanding, held a mixture of relief and concern. How do you feel? Maya asked, settling beside her best friend on the worn couch. Like I can breathe again, Vanessa replied, though even as she spoke the words, she noticed how the apartment's air seemed strangely cold. God, Maya, why did I let it go on so long? Toxic relationships are like slow poison, Maya said, her graduate psychology training evident in her measured tone. They erode your sense of normal gradually, until you can't remember what healthy feels. Over the following weeks, Vanessa threw herself into her freelance photography work with renewed vigor. The creative energy that Devon had slowly drained from her came flooding back. She booked 3 weddings, a corporate event, and even landed a small assignment with Chicago Magazine. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again. But the apartment began to change. It started with scratches along the bedroom wall, thin, deliberate lines that appeared overnight, like someone had dragged their fingernails along the outline. Paint. Vanessa blamed the building's age, the settling foundation, anything rational. Then came the cold spots, pockets of frigid air that moved through rooms without explanation, raising goosebumps on her arms, even when the radiator worked overtime. The heating system in this building is from the Stone Age, Maya said one evening, wrapping herself in a blanket as they watched Netflix. But her voice carried a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. The whispers began in March. Vanessa first heard them through the ventilation system, soft, muffled sounds that could have been wind or settling pipes. But as nights passed, the sounds grew clearer, more distinct. Sometimes she could almost make out words, fragments of conversations she didn't remember having. Did you hear that? She asked Maya one night, both of them frozen in the living room. Here. What? The voice. In the walls, Maya's expression shifted from concern to professional interest. Vanessa, honey, you've been under enormous stress. Sometimes our minds create, I'm not hallucinating, Vanessa snapped, and immediately softened. I'm sorry. I just ... I know what I heard, but the doubt had been planted. In the weeks that followed, Vanessa began to question her own perceptions. The scratches could be explained. The cold spots might be poor insulation. The whispers could be neighbors, pipes, her imagination processing 18 months of emotional trauma. Then she found the message, scrawled inside her bedroom closet. In handwriting she recognized all too well were the words, "Distance is just an illusion. Me more." The pet name Devon had always used, written in his distinctive slanted script across the back wall where no one should have been able to reach. Vanessa's hands shook as she photographed the message. then immediately called Maya at the university. He broke in, Vanessa said without preamble when Maya answered. Devin broke into the apartment. That's impossible. You changed the locks, remember? And the building has security. Then explain this. She sent the photo, and Maya's silence stretched long enough for Vanessa to wonder if the call had dropped Maya. I'm looking at it, Maya said finally. Vanessa, we need to call the police. Officer Ray Delaney had seen enough domestic disputes in his 20 years with Chicago PD to recognize the patterns. The ex-boyfriend who couldn't let go, the escalating harassment, the psychological games designed to make the victim doubt their own sanity. But something about Vanessa Rios's case bothered him in ways he couldn't articulate. When was the last time you had direct contact with Mr. Blackwell? He asked, pen poised over his notepad. The night I broke up with him, February 14th. Vanessa's laugh held no humor. Valentine's Day. How's that for irony? And you're certain about the handwriting? I lived with that handwriting for a year and a half. Love notes, grocery lists, passive-aggressive sticky notes on the bathroom mirror. I know Devin's handwriting better than my own. Officer Delaney made notes, asked about security systems, spare keys, mutual acquaintances who might have access. All standard procedure. But he found himself studying the photograph of the closet. Message with growing unease. The handwriting was cramped into an impossible space, as if written by someone who had somehow compressed themselves into the narrow gap behind hanging clothes. We'll increase patrols in your area, he assured her. And I recommend documenting everything. Take photos. Keep a journal. Save any messages or calls. But 3 days later, Officer Delaney received a call that changed everything. We've got a DOA in Savannah, Georgia, the voice on the other end of. The line explained. Devin Blackwell, 32 years old. Parent suicide. But here's the thing according to the timestamp on his phone. He sent several text messages after the estimated time of death. Delaney felt cold fingers walk up his spine. What kind of messages? All to the same number. A Vanessa Rios in Chicago. They just say the same thing over and over. Distance is just an illusion. Me Amor. The funeral was held on a gray Thursday in Savannah. Spanish moss hanging like funeral. Shrouds from ancient oaks in Bonaventure Cemetery. Vanessa hadn't planned to attend, but something compelled her to make the trip a need for closure, for the final confirmation that Devin Blackwell was truly gone from her life, that Mrs. Blackwell was a frail woman in her 70s, her eyes holding the particular exhaustion of a mother who had spent decades managing her son's increasingly erratic behavior. He was always intense, she told Vanessa over sweet tea in her antebellum home. Even as a child, obsessive. When he loved something, he couldn't let it go. Vanessa learned that Devin had moved back to Savannah after their breakup, taking up residence in his childhood bedroom like a man-child retreating from the world. Mrs. Blackwell spoke of finding him, surrounded by photographs, hundreds of pictures of Vanessa that she had never known he'd taken. Candid shots from their dates, long lens captures of her at work, images that could only have been taken while following her without her knowledge. There were other things, too. Mrs. Blackwell continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. Books. Strange books about ... spiritual matters. He said he was learning to travel without his body, to be with the people he loved even when they didn't want him near. The chill that ran through. Vanessa had nothing to do with George's unpredictable spring weather. Mrs. Blackwell, do you still have those books? The old woman's eyes clouded with fear. I burned them. All of them. Along with the photographs and his journals. I hoped it would give him peace. But she had missed one. Hidden beneath Devin's mattress, Vanessa found a leather-bound journal filled with his increasingly erratic handwriting. The early entries read like a normal diary: complaints about work, observations about their relationship, declarations of love that gradually took on darker undertones. But as the pages progressed, the content shifted into something else entirely. March 3rd. Found a book about astral projection at the used bookstore on Bull Street. The possibilities are endless. Love shouldn't be constrained by physical limitations. March 15th. First successful separation lasted 3 minutes. I could see my body on the bed, could move through the house like I was made of air. Tomorrow, I try to reach Chicago. March 22nd. She can sense me. I know she can. When I'm there in spirit, she gets cold, looks around like she's searching for something. The connection between us is stronger than I ever imagined. The final entry was dated the day before Devon's. Death. Love transcends death. The ancient texts make this clear. The spirit, when driven by true devotion, can anchor itself to the beloved. Physical death is just a transition, not an ending. Tonight, I complete the ritual. Tonight, I assure that we'll never truly be apart. Vanessa's hands shook as she closed the journal. The implications were impossible, irrational, contrary to everything she understood about reality. But they explained so much. The scratches, the cold spots, the whispers, the message in her closet. She had to get away from Chicago. Bender offered the promise of a fresh start. The mile-high city, with its crisp mountain air and endless blue skies, felt like the antithesis of the suffocating atmosphere that had enveloped her Chicago apartment. Vanessa found a small loft in the Highlands neighborhood with exposed brick, walls and large windows that flooded the space with natural light. Maya was skeptical about the move, but supportive, helping pack boxes and promising regular video calls. Officer Delaney, who had become an unlikely ally in the months following Devon's death, provided references to Denver PD and urged her to stay in touch. Geographic distance doesn't always solve these problems, he warned. But sometimes a change of scenery can break the psychological patterns. For 2 blissful weeks, Vanessa felt normal again. She established new routines, found a local coffee shop where she could edit photos, even went on a promising first date with a graphic designer. Named Tom, the loft remained warm and welcoming, free of the inexplicable cold spots that had plagued her Chicago home. Then, on a Tuesday night in early May, she woke to find words carved into the brick wall beside her bed. "You can't run from love." The letters were deep and precise, as if etched by someone with infinite patience and inhuman strength. The brick dust on her sheets was still warm to the touch. Vanessa called Maya at 3 a.m, sobbing into the phone. "He's here, Maya. He followed me. He's in the walls, in the air. He's everywhere. Vanessa, honey, you need to listen to me." Maya's voice carried the calm authority of her psychology training. "What you're experiencing could be a form of PTSD. The mind can create very convincing hallucinations when then explain the message in the wall. Explain how it got there." "I can't," Maya admitted. "But that doesn't mean there isn't a rational explanation." But rationality had become a luxury Vanessa could no longer afford. The phenomena in Denver escalated with terrifying speed. Electronics malfunctioned and her presence lights flickered. Her camera equipment turned on by itself. Her laptop displayed messages she hadn't typed. The temperature in her loft plummeted without warning, her breath visible in air that moments before had been perfectly comfortable. Worse than the physical manifestations were the dreams. Every night, Devon appeared to her with perfect clarity, more real than memory. He spoke of their future together, of the barriers between life and death that his love had overcome. In these dreams, he touched her with hands that felt solid and warm, whispered promises against her neck with breath that smelled of the cologne he'd worn in life. "I told you distance was just an illusion," he said in one particularly vivid nightmare. "Did you really think death would be any different?" Vanessa woke from these encounters with scratches on her arms, bruises on her wrists, and the lingering sensation of being held against her will. Officer Martinez, Denver PD's domestic violence specialist, was sympathetic but limited in what she could offer. "I believe something is happening to you," she assured Vanessa. "But without a living perpetrator, without evidence of forced entry or physical stalking, there's very little we can investigate. So I'm supposed to just live with this? Have you considered speaking to someone? A therapist, maybe a religious counselor?" Sometimes these situations require approaches that go beyond traditional law enforcement. Vanessa tried therapy, but found it impossible to explain her situation without sounding delusional. She consulted with a priest who performed a blessing on her loft, but admitted he had limited experience with such matters. She even researched paranormal investigators, though the few she contacted either wanted payment she couldn't afford or seemed more interested in creating content for social media than actually helping. The isolation was perhaps the worst part. Friends and family, well-meaning but unable to understand, gradually stopped taking her calls. Maya remained supportive, but increasingly suggested medical intervention. Even Officer Delaney, when she called him in Chicago, gently recommended psychological evaluation. By late June, Vanessa was barely sleeping, had lost 15 pounds, and was making serious mistakes in her photography work. Clients complained about missed appointments and unusable shots. Her savings dwindled as her ability to function professionally deteriorated. That's when Maya made an unexpected suggestion. "Come stay with me for a while," she offered during one of their video calls. "I'm house-sitting for my professor in Portland while she's on sabbatical. It's a beautiful old Victorian, completely different environment. Maybe a change of scenery will help." Portland in July was a revelation. The Victorian house Maya was watching sat in the Hawthorne district, surrounded by rose gardens and shaded by towering Douglas firs. Built in 1892, it retained much of its original character-intricate woodwork, stained glass windows, and rooms that flowed into each other with organic grace. For the first time in months, Vanessa slept through the night without disturbance. The house felt peaceful, protected somehow, as if its age and solidity provided a barrier against whatever had been following her. Maya was completing her thesis on trauma manifestation and found Vanessa's experiences fascinating from an academic perspective, though she remained convinced there was a psychological rather than supernatural explanation. "The mind is incredibly powerful," she explained one evening as they sat on the wraparound porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. "It can create sensory experiences that feel completely real. When you combine severe emotional trauma with sleep deprivation and isolation, the brain can essentially start hallucinating while you're awake. So you think I'm crazy?" "I think you're healing," Maya corrected. "And sometimes healing involves the sea." Mind processing trauma in ways that seem irrational. Vanessa wanted to believe her. The peaceful days in Portland, surrounded by Maya's steady presence and the house's protective atmosphere, made her previous experiences seem like chapters from someone else's nightmare. She began to wonder if Maya was right, if her mind had indeed created an elaborate psychological defense mechanism to process the trauma of Devon's obsession. They decided to celebrate Vanessa's improving mental state with a weekend camping trip to Yosemite. Maya had been planning the trip for months as a reward for completing her thesis, and she insisted that Vanessa needed the restorative power of nature. Yosemite in late July was crowded but magnificent. They secured a campsite in the valley, with Half Dome looming majestically above them, and the Merced River providing a constant, soothing soundtrack. For 2 days, Vanessa felt more like herself than she had in months. She took hundreds of photographs, laughed at Maya's terrible camping jokes, and slept deeply in their small tent with only the sounds of nature around them. On their final morning, Vanessa woke before dawn to capture the sunrise on El Capitan. She left Maya sleeping and walked quietly to a meadow she'd scouted the previous evening, her camera equipment carefully balanced as she navigated the dewy grass in the pre-dawn darkness. The first light was just touching the granite peaks when she saw him. Devin stood at the edge of the meadow, as solid and real as he had been in life. Not translucent or ghostly, but physically present, wearing the same clothes he'd died in. His eyes held the same obsessive intensity she remembered, but now tempered with something else, a terrible satisfaction, as if he'd been waiting patiently. For this moment. Hello, me Amor, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the meadow, despite the impossible distance between them. Did you miss me? Vanessa's camera fell from nerveless fingers, the expensive lens shattering against a rock. She tried to run, but her legs felt like they were moving through water. Devin began walking toward her with deliberate steps, and with each footfall, the temperature around her dropped perceptibly. You've led me on quite a chase, he continued conversationally. Chicago to Denver, to Portland, to California. But I told you, didn't I? Distance is just an illusion. You're dead, Vanessa managed to whisper. I saw your grave. Death is just an illusion too, Devin replied, now close enough that she could see the familiar flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Love is the only thing that's real. Love is what survives. He reached out to touch her face, and his fingers felt like ice against her skin. Real ice, real fingers, real touch that left no doubt about his physical presence. Maya, Vanessa screamed, finding her voice at last. Maya, help me. But when she turned toward their campsite, she saw Maya running toward them, still 50 yards away and shouting something Vanessa couldn't hear over the sudden roaring in her ears. When she turned back, Devin was gone. Maya found Vanessa collapsed in the meadow, hypothermic despite the warm morning air, clutching her broken camera and mumbling incoherently about ice-cold fingers and impossible love. The park rangers who responded treated it as a medical emergency, possible heat stroke, dehydration, a psychological break brought on by stress and altitude. But Maya noticed details the rangers missed. The perfect circle of dead grass where Vanessa had been found. The way the temperature in that specific spot remained 20 degrees colder than the surrounding area. The fact that Vanessa's broken camera had somehow captured dozens of photos during the incident, images that showed only empty meadow, but with temperature readings in the metadata that defied explanation. The drive back to Portland was tense and largely silent. Vanessa knew that Maya was processing what she'd witnessed, trying to reconcile her psychological training with phenomena that had no rational explanation. I need to tell you something, Maya said finally as they crossed into Oregon. I've been researching your situation from an academic perspective, treating it like a case study. But what I saw today, ... Vanessa, I think we need to consider the possibility that there are aspects of human experience that psychology can't explain. It was the closest Maya had ever come to admitting that something genuinely supernatural might be happening. Back at the Victorian house, they tried to establish some sense of normalcy, but the peaceful atmosphere that had previously protected Vanessa seemed compromised. The house felt different, now still beautiful, still structurally sound, but somehow more vulnerable, as if Devin's manifestation in Yosemite had strengthened his ability to reach across the veil between life and death. The phenomena began again. Almost immediately, cold spots appeared without warning. Electronic devices malfunctioned. Vanessa woke one morning to find I followed you home, written in condensation on the bathroom mirror. Maya, no longer able to dismiss the events as psychological manifestations, threw herself into research with the same intensity she'd applied to her thesis. She consulted books on parapsychology, reached out to colleagues who studied anomalous experiences, and even contacted a professor emeritus who had spent decades investigating claims of supernatural stalking. There are documented cases, she reported to Vanessa one evening, her laptop surrounded by printouts and academic papers. Not many, and most are poorly substantiated, but there's a consistent pattern. Individuals who die in states of extreme emotional attachment sometimes seem to maintain connections to the objects of their obsession. So what do we do about it? That's where it gets complicated. Traditional methods, religious intervention, cleansing rituals, protective charms, they work sometimes, but not always. And sometimes they make things worse. Worse. How? Maya hesitated. Sometimes the attempt to banish a spirit can anger it, cause it to become more aggressive. There are cases where people died during attempted exorcisms, not from supernatural causes, but from heart attacks, strokes, accidents that seem to occur at suspicious moments. As if summoned by their conversation, the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees in a matter of seconds. Both women could see their breath as frost began forming on the windows despite the warm July evening outside. Then they heard Devon's voice, clear and unmistakable, seeming to come from the walls themselves. "Stop trying to get rid of me, Vanessa. We belong together. We've always belonged together. Accept it, and I'll stop making things difficult. Go to hell." Vanessa said aloud, surprising herself with the venom in her voice. The response was immediate and violent. Every piece of glass in the room, windows, mirrors, drinking glasses, shattered simultaneously. The lights went out, plunging them into darkness broken only by the eerie glow of frost spreading across every surface, like crystalline fingers. Maya grabbed Vanessa's hand and pulled her toward the front door, but it wouldn't open. Neither would the back door or any of the windows. They were trapped inside with a presence that grew stronger and more malevolent by the moment. "He's getting more powerful," Maya whispered as they huddled together in the hallway. "Each manifestation, each time he appears, he's more solid, more able to affect the physical world." "What does that mean?" "I think it means he's not just visiting from wherever he is. I think he's trying to anchor himself here permanently." The next few days were a nightmare of escalating supernatural activity. Objects moved on their own. Walls bled condensation that spelled out increasingly threatening messages. And the temperature fluctuations became so extreme that both women developed frostbite despite being indoors in summer. Maya's research revealed a possible explanation that filled both of them with dread. According to several sources, spirits that had practiced astral projection in life sometimes retained the ability after death, but with a crucial difference. They could use the technique not just to visit the physical world, but to gradually transfer their consciousness into it permanently. "He's not trying to haunt you," Maya explained during one of their whispered conversations in the hallway, the only room in the house that seemed to remain consistently warm. "He's trying to possess you, to take over your body so he can live again. How do we stop it?" Maya's expression was grim. "According to these sources, there are only two ways. Either the spirit voluntarily moves on to whatever comes next, or or what? Or the target of the possession dies, leaving nothing for the spirit to anchor to." The suggestion hung between them like a loaded gun. Vanessa understood the implication immediately. Either she convinced Devon to stop his supernatural stalking, or she eliminated his target by eliminating herself. "There has to be another way," she said firmly. "Maybe there is." Maya pulled out photocopied page from one of her research sources. This is from a 1920s occult manual that describes a ritual for severing spiritual attachments. It's dangerous. The manual warns that it can backfire badly, but it might work. The ritual was complex, requiring specific materials and timing. They spent 2 days gathering supplies: white candles, sea salt, burning sage, and a silver knife that Maya purchased from an antique shop, despite the strange looks from the proprietor. The ritual had to be performed at 3 a.m. on a new moon in A circle made of salt, with both participants maintaining perfect focus on their intention to sever Devon's connection to the physical world. The new moon fell on a Thursday night in early August. By 2:30 a.m., they had prepared the Victorian's living room according to the manual's instructions. Candles provided the only light, casting dancing shadows on the walls that seemed to move independently of the flickering flames. The salt circle was perfect, unbroken, large enough for both women to sit inside comfortably. At exactly 3 a.m., they began. Maya read the incantations from the photocopied pages, while Vanessa focused all her mental energy on visualizing Devon's spirit being drawn away from her, pulled toward whatever afterlife awaited him. The words were in Latin, their meanings obscure, but their cadence somehow powerful and ancient. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Then the temperature began to drop, and they knew Devon was responding to their challenge. He appeared gradually, like a photograph developing in slow motion. First his outline, then his features. Finally, his full presence standing just outside their salt circle, with an expression of rage that Vanessa had never seen. "In life, you can't banish me," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate from multiple directions at once. "I've given up everything to be with you. Heaven, hell, whatever comes next, I chose you instead. You can't undo that kind of sacrifice. I never asked for it," Vanessa replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I never wanted you to die for me, and I don't want you haunting me. Let go, Devon. Move on, I can't." His form wavered slightly, as if the salt circle was indeed affecting him. "Don't you understand? I rewrote the rules of existence itself for love. I found a way to make death meaningless, to make love truly eternal. You should be grateful." Maya continued the incantation, her voice growing stronger as the ritual progressed. The candles flared higher, casting wild shadows that seemed to dance with malevolent life. The salt circle began to glow with a faint silver light. "It's working," Maya whispered between verses. "Keep focusing on separation, on cutting the connection." But Devon's form was becoming more solid, not less. Instead of being banished, he seemed to be drawing power from their attempt to dismiss him. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, stepping closer to the circle's edge. "That ritual isn't for banishment. It's for transference. You're not sending me away, you're inviting me in." Maya's voice faltered as she looked down at the photocopied pages. In the candlelight, she could see additional text that had been too faint to notice before warnings and footnotes that completely changed the ritual's meaning. "Vanessa," she whispered urgently, "we need to stop. This isn't," but it was too late. The silver glow from the salt circle had become a torrent of light, connecting Devon's spirit directly to Vanessa. She felt him entering her consciousness like ice water flooding her veins, his memories mixing with hers, his obsessive love wrapping around her thoughts like chains. "No." Maya screamed, dropping the manual and grabbing the silver knife. "I won't let you have her." What happened next occurred too quickly for Vanessa to fully process while fighting to maintain control of her own mind. Maya lunged forward, breaking the salt circle in her attempt to physically disrupt the spiritual connection. The knife flashed in the candlelight as she drove it toward Devon's increasingly solid form, but the blade passed through him harmlessly and buried itself in Vanessa's chest instead. The shock of physical pain broke Devon's hold on her consciousness, at least temporarily. Vanessa looked down to see the silver knife protruding from beneath her collarbone, Maya's hands still gripping the handle, her best friend's face a mask of horror at what she'd accidentally done. "I'm sorry," Maya sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I was trying to save you. I didn't mean." "It's okay," Vanessa whispered, though she could feel her strength ebbing with each heartbeat. "It's not your fault." But even as Maya called 911, tried desperately to stop the bleeding, Vanessa could feel Devon's presence growing stronger. The knife wound had created an opening, A breach in her physical defenses that he could exploit. Thank you. Devin's voice whispered in her ear, though Maya gave no sign of hearing it. She made it so much easier. Vanessa tried to fight, to push his consciousness away from hers, but she was losing too much blood to maintain the mental effort required. As the ambulance sirens grew louder outside, she felt herself slipping away, not into unconsciousness or death, but into some deeper recess of her own mind, while something else took control of her body. The last thing she remembered was Maya holding her hand in the ambulance, tears streaming down her face as she whispered apologies and prayers to a friend who could no longer respond. Officer Ray Delaney was finishing his shift in Chicago when his phone rang at 4:17 a.m. Pacific Time. The caller ID showed a Portland area code, and the voice on the other end was one he recognized despite the poor connection. Officer Delaney? This is Vanessa Rios. We spoke about my stalking case. Vanessa. Delaney sat up straighter in his patrol car. I heard about what happened in Portland. How are you feeling? There was a pause, and when she spoke again, something in her voice made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. You are right, officer. He never left. He just needed an open door. The line went dead. Delaney immediately called Portland PD, but they told him Vanessa Rios was still in the ICU, sedated and unconscious from blood loss. She hadn't made any phone calls, and according to the nursing staff, she hadn't spoken a word since arriving at the hospital. When pressed, the Portland officers admitted there had been some unusual circumstances surrounding the case. Maya Singh had died by suicide in the hospital waiting room just hours after her friend was admitted. A sudden, unexplained act that left everyone who knew her shocked and confused. The Victorian house where the incident occurred had suffered a mysterious fire that same night, burning to the ground despite the fire department's quick response. And there were the reports from the hospital staff. Several nurses mentioned that Vanessa's room was consistently 20 degrees colder than the rest of the ICU. Her monitor showed normal vital signs, but her skin remained unnaturally pale, almost translucent. Most disturbing of all, she sometimes spoke in her sleep, having conversations in two different voices, as if someone else was using her vocal cords. 3 days later, Vanessa Rios was discharged from the hospital and disappeared without a trace. Her few remaining belongings were found abandoned in a Portland hotel room, along with a note in handwriting that experts couldn't definitively attribute to her or anyone else. Love transcends death. Love transcends everything. We're together. Now forever, just like it was always meant to be. Officer Delaney kept the case file active for months, following up on reported sightings and strange phone calls for numbers that couldn't be traced. But Vanessa Rios, or whatever was wearing her face, had vanished as completely as if she'd never existed at all. Sometimes, late at night when he couldn't sleep, Delaney would listen to the recording of that final phone call. The voice was definitely Vanessa's, but there was something underneath it, a second voice speaking in perfect unison, saying the same words with the same inflection. Two voices, one body, and a love that had indeed transcended death, though not in any way that could be called beautiful or redemptive. In the end, Devin Blackwell had gotten exactly what he wanted. He had found a way to be with Vanessa forever, to make distance truly meaningless. He had overcome the ultimate barrier between them, leaving behind a shell that looked like the woman he'd claimed to love but housed something else entirely. The one who watched from the walls had finally found a way inside, and somewhere in the darkness they continued their eternal, unwilling dance, predator and prey, locked together in a love that death itself couldn't end. Two souls trapped in one body until the stars burned out and the universe itself forgot their names. The story of Vanessa Rios ended not with her death, but with something far worse, her disappearance into a fate that made death seem like mercy by comparison. And in Portland, Denver, Chicago, and Savannah. People still report strange phenomena on certain nights. Cold spots that move like living things, whispers in empty rooms, and the feeling of being watched by eyes that see from impossible places. Some love stories, it seems, are too strong for death to end. And too terrible for the living to survive.